Our first guest tonight is an Academy Award nominated and Emmy Award winning actress. You know from her work in The Wizard of Lies, Dangerous Liaisons, and Batman Returns. She just received a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress for her role in French Exit, which is in theaters on February 12th. Let's take a look.
I spoke to you about this as a possibility for 7 years and an eventuality for 3. What did you think was going to happen? Frances, what was your plan?
My plan was to die before the money ran out, but I kept and keep not dying, and here I am.
Please welcome to the show, Michelle Pfeiffer. Hello, Michelle. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I want to ask, a lot of actors, couldn't do a great deal of work this last year when everything shut down, but you also have a fragrance company, and I'm wondering if you were able to sort of throw yourself into that as so much else was unavailable.
I feel really lucky that not only did my fragrance company, henryrose.com, not only did it survive this past year, but yes, I had something to, get up and do every day, and it was great because it really gave me an opportunity to really get hyper focused on the business.
And do you also have do you feel like you are someone who has a very good nose for fragrance? Because it would strike me that that's an important element of it.
I actually do. I had to learn, though, the sort of language of a perfumer is very different, and I would start with saying, oh, I don't know, I think it smells a little bit orange, and they would say, no, don't tell me what you think it smells like. Tell me what it reminds you of. What do you think of when you smell it? And I learned to say things like, oh, I don't know, it smells like baby doll head. And I've learned how to sort of speak their language. And as it turns out, I actually do have a pretty good nose. Good thing.
Yeah, imagine if you're like congested all the time, you should probably find a different gig. This movie is really wonderful, and it seems like maybe something we haven't seen from you before. As the clip maybe explains pretty well, you play a socialite who runs out of money and then leaves New York for Paris. Did you know right away when you were reading it how good it was?
I did, and that doesn't happen very often. And Patrick DeWitt is such a wonderful writer, and he has such a unique voice. And he writes with he sort of, all of his characters use comedy as a coping tool, and they're sort of dark and funny and absurd, and yet these crazy sort of eccentric characters, and yet somehow by the end of it you end up being able to relate to them and seeing yourselves in their journey. And I just and I loved this character. She was unlike anything I had ever read or anyone I've ever met. Very complicated, very kind of takes no prisoners attitude, and a bit kind of coarse and curt at times, but underneath it a kind of a fragility. And it was a lot of fun to play somebody who just speaks their mind all the time.
I did read you were a little scared about taking on the role. What was it that gave you any hesitation?
Well, I think there are some parts that are closer to you, and this one wasn't at all. And she was from a world that I wasn't that familiar with. I had some friends. I had sort of brushes with this world and this kind of woman throughout my life, because I had friends who grew up in this world. And I was also I knew that it was going to take a lot out of me, and I was a little bit depleted when I started it. but the thing about great material is it kind of just infuses you every day, and you don't. It just sort of you wake up every morning, and it kind of carries you through. And we had such an amazing cast, and working with Asa Jacobs was incredible, and Lucas Hedges, and Valerie McHahey, and McHahey. So it was just, it was a real joy.
I'm not the first person to make an observation that there is a character in this film that is a cat, a black cat. You famously played, and fantastically, I should know, played Catwoman. Was the cat community excited to work with you again?
Thrilled.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, and I didn't really, I have this kind of running theme, and didn't sort of even realize it until actually journalists started asking me about it. But I do love cats. I have a cat. She's not as well behaved as the cats that we worked with. It was one of my first questions for Asa was, number one, talk to me about the tone of this, because I felt like that was critical. And then my second question was, okay, what about this cat, and how are you going to deal with that? It's so funny and fascinating that the characters in the piece just find it completely normal that there's a talking cat.
How many cats do you think you worked with to play the one cat in the movie?
Primarily just two.
Okay.
And they were amazing and really sweet and just kind of normal, you know, not standoffish. And, they were lovely. And I guess there was another one that I didn't know until recently that was a tiny bit edgier. I'm not going to say mean, but they only brought that cat out in one scene where there's a bit of a confrontation with Francis and Small Frank.
So there was sort of the emotional tenor of that scene called for that cat.
Exactly. And, wow. You know, as with animals, they have numerous animals to play the same part, and they are usually better at different things.
Well, I thought they were all great, but all paled in comparison to you. Thank you so much for making the time and being with us today.
I'm so happy. Nice to be on the show.
French Exit will be in theaters on Friday, February 12th.